I returned early from deployment. What I discovered at home changed everything forever. Staff Sergeant Owen Mac Sullivan adjusted his tactical vest one final time as the C-130 transport plane descended through the clouds over North Carolina. After 18 months in Afghanistan, he was finally coming home 3 weeks earlier than scheduled. The mission had been cut short after their forward operating base received new orders, and Mac couldn't wait to surprise his wife Kes and their twin daughters, Tessera and Syra, both 8 years old. He'd kept the early return secret, wanting to see the pure joy on their faces when he walked through the door. Kes's last video call had been strange, distant, distracted, but he'd attributed it to the stress of managing everything alone for so long. She'd been working as a nurse at Charlotte General Hospital while raising the twins, and he knew the burden had been overwhelming. Mac's phone buzzed as the plane taxied to the gate. A text from his neighbor, old Mrs. Henderson. "So sorry to hear about the divorce, Owen. The girls looked so sad when they loaded the moving truck yesterday. Kes seemed relieved, though. Hope you're doing okay over there." His blood turned to ice. Divorce? Moving truck? His hands trembled as he scrolled through his messages, finding nothing from Kes about any divorce or move. The last message from her was 3 days ago. "Miss you, honey. Can't wait for you to come home. The girls are doing great in school." Mac tried calling Kes, straight to voicemail. He called the house landline, disconnected. His heart hammered as he realized something was terribly wrong. At baggage claim, Mac immediately called his best friend and fellow veteran, Tony Rodriguez, who lived 2 hours away in Raleigh. "Tony, I need you to drive to my house right now," Mac said without preamble. "Mac, brother, what's wrong? Aren't you supposed to be in Afghanistan for 3 more weeks?" "Something's happened. Kes is not answering her phone, and my neighbor says there was a moving truck. I need eyes on my house immediately." "I'm already in my car," Tony said. "Give me 90 minutes. Mac rented a car and began the 3-hour drive to Charlotte, his mind racing through possibilities. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe Mrs. Henderson had confused their house with someone else's. But deep down, a cold certainty was settling in his chest. An hour into the drive, Tony called back. "Mac, you need to sit down. I'm driving, just tell me." "The house is empty, brother, completely cleaned out. There's a for sale sign in the yard and it says, under contract. I talked to the realtor, she said the house sold 2 weeks ago, quick cash sale." Mac pulled over to the side of the highway, his vision blurring. "That's impossible. Kes can't sell our house without my signature." "There's more," Tony said quietly. "I talked to Mrs. Henderson. She said Kes told everyone you'd been having problems for months, that you'd agreed to divorce while you were deployed. Said you signed papers and everything." "I never signed any papers," Mac said through gritted teeth. "I don't even know what she's talking about." "Brother, I think you need to get a lawyer. This smells like fraud." Mac sat in his rental car on the side of Interstate 85, watching traffic blur past, and felt something cold and calculating settle into his mind. It was the same feeling he'd had before dangerous missions in Afghanistan, a complete emotional shutdown that allowed him to think clearly and act decisively. Kes hadn't just left him. She'd orchestrated an elaborate deception while he was risking his life overseas. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd underestimated the man she was betraying. Mac made 3 phone calls. First, to his bank, their joint accounts had been emptied 2 weeks ago. Second, to his commanding officer, he needed emergency leave and access to legal assistance. Third, to James Mitchell, a military attorney who specialized in cases involving deployed service members. "Mr. Sullivan," Mitchell said after Mac explained the situation, "what your wife has done is likely criminal fraud. Military members have special protections under the Service Members Civil Relief Act. If she forged your signature or misrepresented your consent, she's facing serious federal charges. I don't want her in prison," Mac said. "I want my daughters, and I want justice." Those aren't mutually exclusive goals, Mitchell replied. Meet me at my office tomorrow morning. We're going to find your family and unravel this deception piece by piece. That night, Mac stayed in a hotel 20 minutes from what used to be his home. He lay awake staring at the ceiling, remembering the last time he'd kissed Kes goodbye at the airport. She'd cried, told him she loved him, made him promise to come home safe. Had it all been an act? How long had she been planning this? His phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Dad? Is that really you? Mom said you were never coming back. Are you really home? Tessera. Mac's hands shook as he typed back. Yes, sweetheart. Daddy's home. Where are you? I'm coming to get you. We're at Grandma Carol's house in Asheville. Mom said you didn't want to see us anymore. She said you found someone else. The lies Kes had told their children ignited a rage in Mac that he'd never experienced. Not in combat, not in the most dangerous situations he'd faced overseas. This was personal. This was about his babies. Tessera, listen to me very carefully. Daddy would never, ever abandon you and Syra. I love you both. More than anything in the world, I'm coming to get you tomorrow. Mom's not here. She went to Florida with her boyfriend. She said she'd be back in a few days. Boyfriend. There it was. The missing piece of the puzzle. What's the boyfriend's name, sweetheart? Derek. He's been around for a while. He's nice, but he's not my daddy. Mac closed his eyes, processing this information. Kes hadn't just left him, she'd been cheating on him while he was deployed, sold their house, emptied their accounts, and was now living it up in Florida while their daughters stayed with Kes's mother. But Kes had made a fatal error in judgment. She'd underestimated the lengths to which a Special Forces soldier would go to protect his children. The war in Afghanistan was over for Mac, but a new war was just beginning. Mac arrived at James Mitchell's law office at 8 a.m. sharp, carrying a thick folder of documents he'd compiled overnight. The attorney, a former JAG officer with silver hair and sharp eyes, reviewed the materials with growing amazement. This is one of the most brazen cases of military spouse fraud I've seen, Mitchell said. She forged your signature on divorce papers, POA documents, and real estate transactions. She told everyone you'd agreed to everything while deployed. The level of deception is staggering. What are my options? Mac asked. Legally, we can have every transaction reversed. The divorce is invalid, you never consented to it. The house sale is fraudulent. But first, we need to secure your daughters. Do you have any idea where they are legally supposed to be? Mac pulled out his phone and showed Mitchell the text conversation with Tessera. Kes's mother, Carol, lives in Asheville. The girls are there while Kes is in Florida with her boyfriend. That's actually good news, Mitchell said. Carol has no legal custody rights. You're their father, you're on active duty, and you never consented to any custody arrangement. We can petition for emergency custody today. What about Kes? What happens when she finds out I'm back? Mitchell's smile was predatory. That's where this gets interesting. She's committed multiple felonies. Wire fraud, forgery, identity theft, violations of the Service Members Civil Relief Act. She's looking at 15 years federal time if she's convicted. But you said you could use that as leverage. Exactly. We'll offer her a deal, full custody to you, division of any remaining assets in your favor, and she serves minimal time in exchange for cooperation and full restitution. Mac nodded. When do we start? We already have. I've filed for emergency custody and fraud charges. The local police will serve papers to Carol's house by noon. You can pick up your daughters this afternoon. At 2 p.m., Mac stood on the porch of Carol's modest house in the mountains outside Asheville. When she opened the door, her face went white. Owen? You're supposed to be in Afghanistan. Plans changed, Mac said calmly. I'm here for my daughters. Kes said you'd agreed to give up custody. Said you'd signed papers. Kes lied, Mac replied, showing her the court documents. These are emergency custody orders. Tessera and Syra are coming home with me. Before Carol could respond, two small figures appeared behind her. Tessera and Syra, both taller than he remembered, stared at him with wide eyes. "Daddy?" Syra whispered. Mac knelt down, opening his arms. Both girls launched themselves at him, nearly knocking him over. They clung to him, crying and talking at once. "Mom said you didn't want us anymore," Tessera sobbed. "She said you found a new family," Syra added through her tears. "Your mother lied," Mac said, his voice thick with emotion. "I would never, ever leave you. I love you both more than anything in the world." Carol watched this reunion with growing distress. "Owen, I don't understand. Kes showed me papers. She said you'd both agreed." "Did you see me sign anything?" Mac asked, standing but keeping his arms around his daughters. "Well, no, but because I didn't. I've been in Afghanistan for 18 months, fighting for our country, while your daughter was committing fraud and lying to our children." His voice remained calm, but there was steel underneath. "Now the girls are coming with me. You can cooperate or the police can escort me. But either way, I'm not leaving here without my daughters." Carol looked at the legal documents again, then at her granddaughters clinging to their father. "I'll help them pack their things." An hour later, Mac was driving down the mountain with Tessera and Syra in the back seat, chattering excitedly about everything that had happened while he was gone. They told him about school, their friends, and how confused they'd been when their mother started talking about moving and Daddy not coming home. "Where's Mom?" Syra asked eventually. "Your mother is in Florida," Mac said carefully. "She's made some bad choices, and now there are going to be consequences." "Are you and Mom getting divorced for real?" Tessera asked. Mac glanced at them in the rearview mirror. "I don't know yet, sweetheart. But whatever happens, you two are my priority. You're staying with me." "Forever?" Syra asked hopefully. "Forever," Mac confirmed. That evening, Mac's phone rang. Kess's name appeared on the screen. He let it go to voicemail, then listened to the message. "Owen, what the hell do you think you're doing? You can't just take the girls. I have custody. Carol called me crying. You're scaring everyone. Call me back immediately." Mac deleted the message and blocked her number. Kess would have to communicate through lawyers now. The next morning, James Mitchell called with an update. "Kess has hired an attorney in Miami. They're claiming this is all a misunderstanding, that she had your verbal consent to handle things while you were deployed." "That's impossible to prove," Mac said, "which is why it's a weak defense. But there's something else. I've been investigating this Derek character. His name is Derek Callahan, and he's got an interesting background." "How interesting?" 3 previous relationships with military wives whose husbands were deployed. Same pattern each time: befriends the wife, convinces her to liquidate assets, then disappears when the husband returns. He's a professional predator who targets military families. Mac felt the cold fury return. So Kess wasn't just cheating on me, she was conned by a professional criminal. That's what it looks like. The question is, do you want to save her from herself? Or do you want to let her face the full consequences of her choices? Mac looked across his hotel room at Tessera and Syra, who were watching cartoons and eating cereal, looking more relaxed than they had in months. "I want my daughters to have a future where they're not ashamed of their mother," he said finally. "But I also want Kess to understand that actions have consequences. Can we do both?" "I think so," Mitchell said. "But first, we need to catch Derek Callahan." Derek Callahan stood on the balcony of the luxury Miami Beach hotel suite, watching Kess cry on the bed behind him. She'd been hysterical since receiving the news that her daughters were gone and her husband was back in the country. "You said he wasn't coming back for 3 weeks," Kess sobbed. "You said we'd have time to get everything sorted out." Derek's jaw tightened. He'd been running this con for years, targeting lonely military wives, but he'd never had a Mark's husband return early. Usually, by the time the soldiers came home, Derek was long gone with whatever money he could extract. Plans change, he said coolly. The important thing is that you got the money out of the accounts before he returned. But the house, the divorce papers, he's going to figure out that I forged his signature. Derek turned to face her, his expression calculating. How much did you get for the house? $250,000 after paying off the mortgage. And the bank accounts? About $40,000. Derek nodded. Nearly $300,000 was a decent score, but not worth the federal charges he was potentially facing if Kes broke under pressure. Here's what's going to happen, Derek said, sitting on the edge of the bed. You're going to go back to North Carolina, apologize to your husband, and tell him this was all a misunderstanding. What about us? Kes asked desperately. Derek almost laughed. Us? Kes, you're about to be facing federal fraud charges. You think I'm going to stick around for that? The color drained from Kes's face. You're leaving me? I'm protecting both of us. You go back, make nice with the soldier boy, and hopefully, he'll be too grateful to have his kids back to press charges. But I love you, Kes whispered. This time Derek did laugh. No, you don't. You love the idea of me. You love the expensive dinners, the fancy hotels, the feeling of being desired. But you don't actually know me at all. As Derek packed his bags, Kes realized with growing horror that she'd destroyed her marriage, abandoned her children, and committed multiple felonies for a man who was discarding her like trash. Meanwhile, in Charlotte, Mac was having a very different conversation with Tony Rodriguez and James Mitchell. We've traced Derek's credit cards to Miami, Mitchell reported. He's staying at the Fontainebleau with your wife, living it up on the money from your house sale. What's the plan? Mac asked. We coordinate with federal authorities. Wire fraud across state lines, targeting military families. This guy is going to federal prison, but we need to be smart about how we handle Kessie. Tony leaned forward. Mac, you know I'll support whatever you decide, but think about those girls. They're going to grow up with this story. How do you want it to end? Mac looked at his friend, then at his attorney. I want Derek Callahan to face justice for what he's done to military families, but I want Kes to have a chance to be a mother to our daughters again after she's earned it. That's going to require forgiveness, Mitchell warned. No, Mac corrected. It's going to require justice. There's a difference. The next day, Mac received a call from an unknown Florida number. Owen, it's me. Kes's voice was barely above a whisper. I need to talk to you. You can talk to my lawyer. Please, just listen. I know what I did was wrong. I know I hurt you and the girls. But Derek, he's not who I thought he was. He played me, Owen. He targeted me because you were deployed. Mac was quiet for a long moment. Where is he now? He left. Took $50,000 from our account and disappeared this morning. He said I was a liability. Are you ready to come home and face what you've done? Kes was crying. Gosh, I don't know how to fix this. You start by telling the truth. All of it. To me, to the girls, to the authorities. You cooperate completely with the investigation into Derek, and you accept responsibility for your choices. And then we see if there's anything left to save. 3 days later, Kes returned to Charlotte. Mac met her at the airport, not alone, but accompanied by James Mitchell and a federal agent named Susan Chen. Kes looked terrible. She'd lost weight, her hair was disheveled, and she couldn't meet Mac's eyes. Mrs. Sullivan, Agent Chen said, you're under arrest for wire fraud, forgery, and violations of the Service Members Civil Relief Act. As they handcuffed Kes, she finally looked at Mac. The girls are safe, Mac said. They're with me, where they belong. I'm sorry, Kes whispered. I know, Mac replied. Now prove it. Chapter 4. Unraveling the Web. The federal investigation into Derek Callahan revealed the full scope of his operation. Over the past 5 years, he'd targeted 12 military wives, stealing over $2 million and destroying countless families. Kes's cooperation proved crucial in building the federal case against him. Derek was arrested in Las Vegas 2 weeks later, trying to run the same con on a Navy wife whose husband was deployed to Japan. Kess's testimony and financial records provided the prosecution with everything they needed for multiple felony convictions. Meanwhile, Mac faced the challenge of helping his daughters process their mother's betrayal and absence. Tessera and Syra were staying with him in a furnished apartment while the legal situation resolved, but they asked about their mother constantly. "When is Mommy coming home?" Syra asked during dinner one evening. Mac set down his fork and looked at both girls. "Your mother made some very bad choices while I was in Afghanistan. She lied to people. She took money that didn't belong to her, and she hurt our family. Now she has to face the consequences." "Is she in jail?" Tessera asked quietly. "She's in legal trouble, yes. But she's helping the police catch a bad man who tricked her into doing these things." "Did she really not want us anymore?" Syra's voice was barely audible. Mac moved to kneel beside her chair. "Listen to me, both of you. Your mother loves you. She made terrible choices, but they weren't about not loving you. Sometimes adults make mistakes, really big mistakes, and they have to work very hard to make things right again." "Will she try to make things right?" Tessera asked. "I think so," Mac said. "But it's going to take time, and it's going to be hard work." James Mitchell had negotiated a plea agreement for Kess. In exchange for her full cooperation against Derek and complete restitution of stolen funds, she would serve 18 months in minimum security federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised probation. The alternative was a potential 15-year sentence if she went to trial and lost. "She's taking the deal," Mitchell informed Mac. "She'll be sentenced next month." "What about custody?" "You'll have full custody while she's incarcerated. After her release, we can negotiate supervised visitation leading to shared custody if she demonstrates genuine rehabilitation." Mac nodded. "I want to talk to her before sentencing." The meeting took place in a small conference room at the federal courthouse. Kess looked smaller somehow, wearing an orange jumpsuit and handcuffs. When she saw Mac, she immediately began crying. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I'm sorry." "Tell me why," Mac said simply. Kess looked up, confused. "Why what? Why did you do it? Not the surface reasons, not the excuses. Why did you decide to destroy our family?" Kess was quiet for a long time, wiping tears from her face. "Because I was angry," she finally said. "I was angry that you chose the military over us. I was angry that I had to handle everything alone. I was angry that you seemed to love your job more than you loved me. So you decided to punish me. At first, it wasn't about punishment. Derek made me feel important, desired. He listened to me complain about being a military wife, and he told me I deserved better. And then he started suggesting that you probably wouldn't want to come back to the same life after what you'd seen in Afghanistan. He said most soldiers prefer to start fresh when they return from deployment. He convinced me that you'd be relieved if I just handled the divorce myself." Mac leaned back in his chair. "Did you ever try to contact me? To have an actual conversation about our marriage?" Kess shook her head miserably. "I was afraid you'd talk me out of it. And by the time I realized what Derek really was, it was too late. I'd already signed papers, sold the house, told everyone we were getting divorced." "What did you plan to tell the girls?" "Derek said we'd bring them to Florida once everything was settled. He said he'd be a good stepfather." Her voice broke. "I actually believed him." Mac studied his wife's face, seeing the woman he'd married buried under layers of shame and regret. "Do you understand what you've done to Tessera and Syra?" "I've ruined their lives," Kess whispered. "No," Mac said firmly. "You've damaged their sense of security and trust. But their lives aren't ruined if you're willing to do the work to earn back their respect." Kess looked up hopefully. "You'd let me try?" "I'd let you try," Mac confirmed. "But understand I'm never going to trust you again." Our marriage is over, but if you can prove to me that you're genuinely committed to being a good mother, I'll support a relationship between you and the girls. What do I have to do? Serve your time. Get therapy. Figure out how to be a person who doesn't abandon her children when life gets difficult, and accept that you'll be earning back their love one day at a time for the rest of your life. Kes nodded, tears streaming down her face. I'll do whatever it takes. We'll see, Mac said, standing to leave. At the door, Kes called his name. Owen, thank you. For not giving up on the girls. For being the parent they needed when I wasn't. Mac paused. That's what fathers do, Kes. We protect our children, even from their mothers when necessary. 6 months later, Mac had established a new routine with Tessera and Syra. They lived in a 3-bedroom house he'd rented in a good school district, close to the base where he'd been assigned to train other soldiers preparing for deployment. The girls were thriving in therapy, learning to process their mother's abandonment and their father's return. Derek Callahan had been sentenced to 12 years in federal prison. The investigation had revealed that his con had destroyed 17 military families over 7 years. Kes's cooperation had been instrumental in ensuring he couldn't hurt anyone else. Kes herself had been sentenced to 18 months and was serving her time at a minimum security facility in West Virginia. She'd been a model prisoner, participating in counseling programs and maintaining regular contact with Mac through supervised calls to the girls. The phone calls were awkward at first. Tessera and Syra weren't sure how to talk to their mother, and Kes struggled with the shame of her situation. But gradually, they began to rebuild some form of communication. Mommy, when are you coming home? Syra asked during one of their weekly calls. In about 8 more months, sweetheart, Kes replied. But when I do come home, I'll be living in a different place. Daddy is going to be your primary parent. Will we still see you? Tessera asked. If you want to see me, yes. But I have to earn the right to be your mom again. I made very bad choices, and I have to prove that I've learned from them. Mac listened to these conversations with mixed emotions. He was glad that Kes seemed to be taking responsibility for her actions, but he remained skeptical about her long-term commitment to change. His skepticism was challenged when he received a call from Kes's prison counselor, Dr. Martinez. Mr. Sullivan, I wanted to speak with you about your wife's progress, Dr. Martinez said. In 20 years of working with inmates, I've rarely seen someone work as hard to understand their behavior as Kes has. What do you mean? She's been in individual therapy twice a week, group therapy daily, and she's completed programs on financial responsibility, parenting skills, and relationship psychology. She's also written extensive letters to you and your daughters not asking for forgiveness, but taking responsibility for specific actions and their consequences. Mac was surprised. She hasn't mentioned any letters. She hasn't sent them. She told me she doesn't have the right to ask for your attention until she's proven she's changed. She's keeping them as a record of her own growth process. After the call, Mac found himself reconsidering his assumptions about Kes's incarceration. Was it possible that she was genuinely trying to become a better person? His answer came during a visit to the prison 3 months before Kes's release. She looked healthier than she had in years. She'd gained back the weight she'd lost. Her hair was neat, and she carried herself with a quiet dignity he hadn't seen before. Thank you for coming, Kes said as they sat across from each other in the visiting room. How are the girls? They're doing well. Tessera made honor roll and Syra joined the soccer team. Kes smiled genuinely. That's wonderful. I'm so proud of them. They miss you, Mac said carefully. I miss them too, every day. But I also understand that missing them isn't enough. I have to earn the right to be in their lives again. Mac studied her face. Dr. Martinez says you've been working hard. I've been trying to understand how I became the kind of person who could abandon her children. The therapy has been painful, but necessary. And what have you learned? Kes was quiet for a moment. I learned that I never developed healthy coping mechanisms for stress and disappointment. When you deployed, instead of finding ways to manage my feelings, I looked for escape. Derek offered escape from responsibility, from the challenges of military life, from the hard work of being a good mother and wife. That's very honest. I also learned that I was a coward when our marriage became difficult. Instead of talking to you about it, I chose to believe that you didn't care about us. It was easier to be angry at you than to admit that I was struggling. Mac leaned forward. Why didn't you tell me you were struggling? Because I thought it made me weak. I thought military wives were supposed to handle everything perfectly. I didn't want you to think I couldn't manage. Kes, I would have come home. If you'd told me you were in crisis, I would have requested emergency leave. Kes's eyes filled with tears. I know that now, but at the time, I convinced myself that you were happier in Afghanistan than you would be at home with us. That was never true. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not trusting you, for not communicating, for making assumptions about your feelings, and most of all, for hurting Tessera and Syra. Mac sat back, processing this conversation. Kes seemed different, more self-aware, more accountable. But he'd been fooled before. What do you want from me? He asked directly. Nothing, Kes said, surprising him. I want to earn the right to be part of the girls' lives again, but I don't expect anything from you. I know our marriage is over. I know I destroyed your trust. I just want the chance to prove that I can be a good mother, even if I wasn't a good wife. And if I said no? If I decided that you'd lost that right permanently? Kes's face crumpled briefly, but she composed herself. Then I'd have to live with that. It would break my heart, but I'd have to accept it as the consequence of my choices. Mac nodded slowly. I'm not ready to make any decisions yet, but I'm willing to see how you do when you're released. The girls need to see you try to make amends. Thank you, Kes whispered. That's more than I deserve. It's not about what you deserve, Mac said. It's about what Tessera and Syra need. Kes's release from prison was deliberately low-key. Mac didn't want to build up the girls' expectations, so he simply told them that their mother would be living in a halfway house in Charlotte and that they would see her for supervised visits. The first visit took place at a family therapy center, with a counselor present to help navigate the reunion. Tessera and Syra were nervous, clinging to Mac's hands as they walked into the small conference room. Kes stood when they entered, and Mac was struck by how different she looked. She was wearing simple clothes, jeans and a sweater, and her hair was shorter, styled plainly. She looked older, but also somehow more solid, more present than she had been before. Hi, girls, she said softly, not moving toward them. Hi, Mom, Tessera said hesitantly. Syra hung back behind Mac. You both look so grown up, Kes said, her voice thick with emotion. I've missed so much. We missed you too, Tessera said, glancing at Mac for reassurance. The session was awkward but not traumatic. Kes asked about school, friends, and activities, listening carefully to their answers. She didn't make promises or excuses, but simply focused on reconnecting with her daughters. After the girls left with Mac, Kes met with the family therapist, Dr. Patricia Williams. How do you think that went? Dr. Williams asked. Better than I expected, Kes admitted. They're both so much more mature than when I left. They've had to grow up quickly. How did it feel to see them? Heartbreaking, Kes said honestly, but also hopeful. They didn't seem afraid of me, just cautious. That's a good sign. What are your goals for these visits? I want them to know that I love them and that I'm committed to being reliable now. I don't expect them to forgive me immediately, but I want them to see that I'm different. Over the following months, the visits gradually became more relaxed. Kes moved from the halfway house to a small apartment and got a job at a medical clinic. She attended therapy twice a week and followed all the terms of her probation. More importantly, she showed up. Every visit, Every scheduled call, every commitment, she was present and engaged. When Tessera had a soccer game, Kes asked if she could attend. When Sierra had a school play, Kes requested permission to be there. Mac watched this transformation with cautious optimism. Kes seemed genuinely changed, but he had learned not to trust too quickly. The test came 8 months after Kes's release. Tessera came down with pneumonia and was hospitalized for 3 days. Kes called Mac as soon as she heard, asking if she could visit. "I know I don't have any right to be there," she said, "but she's my daughter and I'm scared." Mac found himself looking at this woman who had once betrayed him completely, now asking permission to comfort their sick child. "You can come," he said, "but if you upset her or make this about you, you'll leave immediately. I understand." Kes spent those 3 days in the hospital, taking shifts with Mac so that Tessera was never alone. She didn't try to take charge or assert parental authority. She simply held Tessera's hand, read to her, and provided comfort. On the 3rd day, as Tessera was recovering, she looked at both her parents sitting on either side of her hospital bed. "Are you and Daddy getting back together?" she asked Kes. Kes glanced at Mac, then back at Tessera. "No, sweetheart. Daddy and I are not getting back together. I hurt him too badly for that. But we're both going to be your parents, and we're going to work together to take care of you and Syra." "So you're not leaving again?" "I'm never leaving you again," Kes said firmly. "I made a terrible mistake before, but I learned from it. I'm staying right here in Charlotte, and I'm going to be part of your life for as long as you want me to be." Tessera nodded, seeming satisfied with this answer. Later, in the hospital cafeteria, Mac and Kes had their first real conversation since her return. "Thank you for letting me be here," Kes said. "Thank you for showing up," Mac replied. "Not just here, but for the past 8 months. The girls needed to see that you're reliable now." "I almost lost them forever," Kes said quietly. "I almost threw away the most important thing in my life for a fantasy. But you didn't. You came back, you did the work, and you're earning their trust again." Kes looked at him with tears in her eyes. "I know you'll never forgive me, Owen. I know I destroyed something that can't be repaired. But I want you to know that leaving you and the girls was the worst mistake of my life. If I could go back." "You can't go back," Mac interrupted gently. "None of us can. But you can keep moving forward. You can keep being the mother Tessera and Sierra deserve. Is that enough? For you, I mean?" Mac considered the question. "It has to be. Our marriage is over, Kes, but our family is finding a new shape. And maybe that's enough." Kes nodded, wiping her eyes. "I'll take enough. I'll take whatever chance you're willing to give me to be their mother." "Then keep showing up," Mac said. "Keep being present. Keep proving that you've changed. Not to me, but to them." 2 years after Kes's release, the family had settled into a new rhythm. Tessera and Syra split their time between Mac's house and Kes's apartment, moving seamlessly between 2 parents who had learned to co-parent despite their fractured history. Kes had been promoted to office manager at the medical clinic and was pursuing her nursing degree part-time. She'd maintained her therapy sessions and had become an advocate for military families, speaking at support groups about the dangers of isolation and the importance of communication. Mac had been promoted to Master Sergeant and was now training soldiers in family readiness programs, using his own experience to help other military couples navigate the challenges of deployment. The girls, now 10 years old, had adjusted remarkably well to their new reality. They understood that their parents weren't getting back together, but they felt secure in knowing that both parents were committed to their well-being. "Dad," Tessera said one evening as Mac helped her with homework, "are you happy?" The question caught him off guard. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "I mean, are you happy with how things are now? With Mom living separately but still being our mom?" Mac set down the pencil he'd been holding and looked at his daughter. At 10, Tessera had developed an emotional intelligence that sometimes surprised him. "I'm content," he said carefully. "I'm proud of your mother for doing the hard work to earn back your trust. I'm grateful that you and Sira have both your parents in your lives. And I'm happy that our family, even though it looks different now, is strong." "But are you lonely?" Sira asked, looking up from her own homework. Mac smiled. "These girls never missed anything." "Sometimes, but I have you too. I have my work, and I have friends. I'm okay." "Mom said she's lonely too," Tessera said quietly. "Your mother and I made choices that have consequences," Mac explained. "Some consequences last forever, but that doesn't mean we can't build good lives from where we are now." The truth was, Mac had been dating someone for the past 6 months, Dr. Jennifer Walsh, a psychologist who worked with veterans. She understood his situation and had been patient with the complexities of his family dynamic. The girls had met her a few times and liked her, which was important to Mac. Cass, for her part, hadn't dated anyone since Derek. She'd told Mac that she was focused on rebuilding her relationship with the girls and wasn't ready for romantic relationships yet. "I need to learn how to be a whole person by myself before I can be part of a couple again," she'd explained during one of their co-parenting check-ins. Mac respected that. It showed a level of self-awareness that the old Kes had lacked. The moment that truly showed Mac how much Kes had changed came during Tessera's middle school graduation. As they sat in the auditorium, Mac with Jennifer, Kes sitting a few rows behind them, Tessera was called to the stage to receive an award for academic excellence. In her brief acceptance speech, Tessera thanked several people, including both her parents. "I want to thank my dad for showing me that you never give up on the people you love, even when they make mistakes," she said, looking directly at Mac. "And I want to thank my mom for showing me that it's never too late to change, that you can come back from your worst mistakes if you're willing to do the work." The audience applauded, but Mac was focused on Kess's face. She was crying quietly. Not the dramatic tears of her past, but the quiet tears of someone who understood the weight of redemption. After the ceremony, as families gathered outside, Jennifer squeezed Mac's hand. "That was beautiful," she said. "You should be proud of all of them." "I am," Mac replied, watching Kes hug Tessera and Syra, all three of them laughing about something. Kes approached him as they prepared to leave. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" "For giving me the chance to earn that moment, for letting me be here to see our daughter succeed." Mac nodded. "You earned it, Kes. You put in the work." "I know I can never fully repair what I broke," she continued, "but I hope you know that I'm grateful every day for the chance to try." "I know," Mac said, and he meant it. As they walked to their separate cars, Mac reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. 3 years ago, he'd returned from deployment to find his life destroyed by betrayal. Now his daughters were thriving, his ex-wife was a genuinely changed person, and he was building a new relationship with someone who understood his values. It wasn't the life he'd planned, but it was a good life. Sometimes, Mac realized, the best you can do is build something meaningful from the pieces that remain. 5 years after that devastating return from Afghanistan, Mac stood in his backyard watching Tessera and Syra play with Jennifer's daughter Katie, whom he'd recently become stepfather to through marriage. Kes was there too, along with her new husband, Robert, a kind, steady man who worked as a teacher and understood the complexities of blended families. It had taken Mac 3 years to fully trust Kes's transformation, but she'd proven herself consistently. She'd never missed a visit, never broken a promise, never put her own needs ahead of the girls'. She'd earned her way back into their lives through actions, not words. The conversation between Mac and Kes that day was easy, focused on Tessera's upcoming start of high school and Sira's interest in joining the debate team. They'd learned to co-parent effectively, putting their daughter's needs first and maintaining appropriate boundaries. "You know," Kes said as they watched the girls play, "I used to think that making a mistake meant you were a bad person forever. I thought there was no coming back from what I'd done." "What changed your mind?" Mac asked. "You did," she said simply. "You could have destroyed me completely. You had every right to keep the girls from me forever, but you chose to let me earn my way back. You chose to believe that people can change if they're willing to do the work." Mac considered this. "I didn't do it for you," he said honestly. "I did it for Tessera and Syra. They needed to know that their mother loved them enough to fight to be worthy of them again." "I know," Kes replied, "but the result was the same. You gave me a chance at redemption." As the sun set over their gathering, Mac thought about the lessons this experience had taught him. Betrayal could destroy a marriage, but it didn't have to destroy a family. People could change, but only if they were willing to face their failures honestly and do the sustained work of becoming better. And sometimes, the most profound act of strength wasn't revenge. It was allowing someone the opportunity to prove they could be better than their worst moment. Tessera ran over to him, now 15 and beautiful, with Kes's eyes and his stubborn chin. "Dad, we're planning a family movie night next weekend. All of us. You, Jennifer, Katie, Mom, Robert, Sierra, and me. Are you in?" Mac looked at this girl who had survived her mother's abandonment and her parents' divorce to become a confident, loving young woman. He looked at Syra, equally resilient and wise beyond her years. He thought about the family they'd built from the ashes of the old one, messier, more complicated, but ultimately stronger because it was built on truth, rather than illusion. "I'm in," he said, hugging his daughter close. And for the first time since that devastating phone call from Mrs. Henderson 5 years ago, Mac felt that his family, in all its complex, imperfect forms, was exactly where it was supposed to be. The end.